going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And this week we are here for the continuation of our review of the Innistrad Crimson Vow stories. We're back to the main stories. We alternate because that's how they're released, so that's how we're reviewing them. And we're here for episode 2, The Dolorous Weight of Pleasantries, once again by K. Arsenault Rivera. My quick review at the top of this one is that I thought this one was good. I don't think that, it hit on a good number of story points, so for that it's important, but I don't know that any part of this story is like, oh my god, I loved it, memorable, necessarily, but it's still an important story, and there was nothing offensive or bad about it.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little bit, let down. Because I was like, oh, the wedding, it's going to be, so cool. And then this story was not. Hopefully that means that the next story will, ramp up with the festivities.
Yes. I assume as much as well, yeah.
But, yeah, I was really ready for a wedding in this story, and I didn't really get one.
Yeah, so we can talk about it more in the full review itself. But so for those of you who have not had a chance to read the story yet, or if it's been a bit and you want a refresher before listening to our review, we've tried to remove as many barriers as possible, as we always say. So feel free to check the top link in the description down below. It will take you directly to this story so that you can all read it for yourselves, again, either for the first time or as a refresher. And then, of course, we would love it if you would come back here and join us in giving us your opinions as we give you ours, whether they compare with ours, contrast with ours, whatever the case may be. We just want to keep the conversation going. So, before we get into the full review itself, just a quick reminder, we are so grateful that you're here, and thank you for doing so. Please don't forget while you are here to subscribe and ring that bell so that you will make sure that you get notifications whenever any of our videos come out, including more JaARs going forward, and our live streams, which are every Monday and Thursday for the month of December 2021.
Yes.
From 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time right here on this channel. So the day that this video comes out, if it is the month of December 2021, we will be streaming. We will be live 8 to 10 p.m. that evening. Otherwise, we'll be back to our regular Friday time, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, any other time that you are watching this. So definitely stay tuned for that, and we will be continuing, at least for the time that we're recording this, we're going to be continuing to play through X-Men Legends on our Friday or Thursday streams, and on Monday is always MTG Arena. So definitely tune in for that. This past week on Arena, we had an amazing week.
Yeah.
A really cool stream. So if you missed it, you can always check out the VODs, but of course, we would love it if you would be there live. We're happy to interact with you all in chat as well, so definitely come in and say hello. But onto the full review itself. I liked that we got at least a little bit of the wedding stuff, kind of like what you were talking about. So we got to hear about or see, depending on how you want to infer it with a story, right? So it was read, so we saw it and or heard it about what the decorations looked like, what the human thralls looked like, the color scheme, etc., the dress code that we heard about a couple of times. I appreciated that. I thought it was really good, and it, I think, emphasized to me that I get to actually give props, that the story and the cards, I think, did a really good job of meshing in terms of that style of the wedding. So the story did a good job of explaining what we've already seen in the arts.
Yeah.
And again, I assume that's the order just because that's traditionally how Wizards has done things. I'm okay if I'm wrong on that. I'm okay with being wrong on that. And people can correct me if they've read or heard somewhere in particular. But I imagine that the art direction as well as the kind of world building dictated all of that information. It was given to the artists began to draw, and then it was given to the author, and then the author wrote the story. But still, I appreciated the consistency because with... And even, we were just talking about MTG Arena, even on Arena, the image of the battlefield for when we're playing Crimson Vow Limited looks similar to what we were reading about and what we've seen on the card art. So it's the fact that it's all very consistent in a world where in the past couple of weeks we've been complaining about art in the stories not being synergistic with the story.
Right.
That's really frustrating. So I'm glad that this was consistent in that way.
Yeah, I will point out that this story did hammer home the coffin was there at the wedding, as opposed to being present in the crypt or wherever it normally is.
Yeah, agreed.
Where that one art showed an empty coffin. It seems to be the outlier there.
Right.
That the coffin was taken along with the man.
Yeah. Or the man along with the coffin. Either way, but yes, absolutely. And that was definitely something that we talked about if you missed it a few weeks ago. So thank you for reminding us of that as well. But yeah, I appreciated that consistency. I also liked that we got to hear about the Dumnathi, or Dumnathi, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I'd like to say that they are new to Innistrad, but I will at least say, so that I'm not being bad here and saying the wrong thing, that the Dumnathi as a particular house of
Vampires?
Thank you. Of vampires are new to me. And so, not something that I remember hearing about in stories in the past or art in the past or things like that, or cards in general.
Are you sure?
I thought so.
Okay, because I thought I had heard of them before. I think I didn't remember anything about them.
Okay.
But I feel like I had heard of them before.
Well,
but maybe it was just something with a similar name or something.
Maybe. And they do mention it twice in this story about the fact that they are rumored to be connected with demons in some way, and that specifically Henrika Dumnathi is the rumored ex-lover of Grizzlebrand.
Which I was like, whoa.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay.
Really, really cool. Because again, I guess it depends. I'm curious what the Venn diagram would look like of people who have never heard of Grizzlebrand before, people who have heard of Grizzlebrand and know of him because of his story relevance, and people who have heard of Grizzlebrand and know of him because of the prolificness or prolificality, if you will, of his card. Like the original card that is he's just very good. He's a very good card and used often in Commander games and things like that. And obviously more eternal formats. So I'm curious what that breakdown is, because like hearing about him here, both of us were like Amy said, just like, whoa.
Okay.
So I'm curious if people who may not follow along with the stories, like maybe these are the first stories they've read, would they still be kind of shocked because they're at least aware of Grizzlebrand's notoriety as a popular card, and so they would know, as opposed to like, whoa, that's one of Liliana's demon contractors,
Right.
Instead, it would be like, whoa, that's that awesome card that people use all the time in Commander and stuff. So, like I said, I'd be curious where that lies, but to us, it was like kind of a big deal.
Cool.
Yeah. So, then we have more information about, like, again, I think this story was very descriptive. That's probably the best part of it, was all the descriptions that we got for how the room looked, how the people were dressed, etc., as I mentioned before. And one of the things that I wrote down here was the talk of the thralls who were dressed in Abyssinian finery. Mm-hmm. That is so rude. Because it's honestly, I would think of it as a kind of a 1-2 punch, right? When we hear about them dressed in Abyssinian finery, I believe that this is like just prior to Sorin entering that we hear about that. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit of a slap in the face to Sorin of like, hey, remember Avacyn? Doesn't that suck? Gotta suck for you, dude. Wow. That's messed up to do that. plus the fact that the humans dressed in Abyssinian finery and worshipping Avacyn, they were supposed to be doing it to protect themselves from things like vampires.
Right.
And now these humans are at the service of vampires while being servants at a vampire wedding that could possibly take over the plane, essentially, in terms of power and leadership. So it's like...
Meanwhile, they're dressed as, Abyssinian...
That's what I'm saying, like priests or followers or whatever. I think that is amazing. And especially because Kay Arsenal Rivera had mentioned how important it was to them that that the Abyssinian symbols in Midnight Hunt played such a big role.
Right.
And now that we're here in Crimson Vow, one of the first times that we hear about an Abyssinian symbol is like, yeah, it's on the servants that are being like eaten and killed and etc.
And it's for the lols,
It sure was.
It's all a big joke.
To Olivia,
And of course it is, because it's something so important to the humans, and so...
and to Soren, arguably.
And to Soren, and so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
To Soren and the humans. And so, of course, these over-the-top, egotistical, celebrating their manipulations vampires are doing just that.
Yeah.
They're celebrating their manipulations and celebrating the death of Avacyn, essentially. And the fact that means that they have a lot more power now.
Yeah. And, right. And like, the fact that they're so brazenly willing to do that and so cocky about it, I wrote, it's just so rude. Like, it's just like, I think even more so than some people might realize that it's so rude, it's so rude. Because it works on so many levels, which is almost certainly why Olivia does it here, but it's like, wow. It's like a slap in the face to everybody that...
Right.
Like, even...
It's like wearing a middle finger t-shirt.
Yeah.
And just, like, pointing it at everyone that you come across.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's even rude to, like, Arlen Cord. Arlen Cord, it was... worshipping Avacyn was such a big part of her life. So, I doubt that they will talk about it specifically, because I think that was... It was mentioned here so that you get the visual, and that's probably as far as it will go, as far as I'm concerned. And I would be totally okay with that, because I get it. But it would also be fine, in my opinion, if Arlen comes in as part of the Gatewatch force attacking the wedding, and has to take pause because of that. Like, she sees that symbol, and if you'll allow me to mention, and then you can run away with it if you would like to, but... that trauma comes back to her of remembering her father and all of his hard work of making the wards and etc. And the massacre, the Dawnheart Festival massacre, that all these people she wasn't able to save, despite the fact that they were using their worship and their faith and their love of this plane and Avacyn and etc. and just did not work out for them whatsoever. So
nope. Or maybe the kind of thing where she'll walk in, she'll see the symbols, and it'll take a minute to hit her. Like it'll like she'll approach them because they'll sort of represent an amount of safety for her initially. Until she realizes, oh no, the fact that you're wearing those means that you're an aggressor.
Yeah, or you're being treated as a laughing stock at this.
Yeah. That you're not... that you're not the person that I want to be approaching at the moment that I'm entering this room. Is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. I completely, because you're like, oh, thank God that someone's here to help us.
Right.
No. No, it's the opposite. So yeah, I could absolutely see that as well.
Yeah, like I could see her just like going up to them like, oh, you too. And then like realizing, oh, yeah, this is bad.
Yeah. Not what I wanted. Not a good time. I appreciated that one of our questions got answered here. One of the questions that I think more so you than I, but I've also been thinking, and I just think you vocalized it more. We finally find out how Edgar is being brought in as part of this union, like why he's okay with this, right? What would make him want to do it, despite the fact that Soren's sitting there being like, "This is a dumb idea, like this is real dangerous, this could be awful," and even in this situation where Soren calls out to Edgar and says, "You're being brainwashed. This is wrong."
You're
like
under a trance.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because he's under a trance.
Right. And I mean that makes sense for a vampire, right?
Sure.
That's kind of part of the trope. But I still was curious how
I don't know that like blood on your coffin really does it.
Well, no, right. Well,
I know it like goes in his mouth or whatever. But
yeah. He said it goes through the grooves and like drips down into his mouth. But then when he awoke from the coffin, he like drank from her wrist straight up. More so. So yeah, that was
coffin blood with a wrist chaser. Yeah.
I feel like it was more coffin blood appetizer with a wrist entree, but either way, whatever food terminology you'd like to use, food or drink analogy you'd like to use, I think it works out just fine. But I appreciated that question got answered, so that like we had that general idea because Edgar's awakening shows her feeding him, but like now we hear that Olivia's mood gets transferred into him through that blood transfer, to the point where Soren mentions the fact that when he would awaken his grandfather, he would have to spend considerable time checking his mood and his feelings and whatever, so that when he wakes his grandfather, it's able to be as peaceful of a transition from asleep to awake as possible, because what I kind of appreciated, and again, it's the second time that we're talking about Soren for Crimson Vow, and so it's the second time where I get to say, I think that these stories are doing a good job in making Soren be a relatable character at this point. Because he says, like, he kind of humanizes himself and his vampiric plight by saying, you know, the awakening is a lot scarier than people give it credit for. Like, nobody talks about it, but it's actually scary. It's a jarring experience, no pun intended. It's a scary thing for the vampires. And again, nobody talks about it because they're supposed to be these, like, noble and regal figures, and they're immortal, and yet they're drinking somebody's blood. They're getting their emotions into them, plus like waking up and not knowing how long you've been asleep or where you are or whatever. So,
and you don't know who's waking you up either until you are awake and see them and know who they are.
You're kind of at the mercy of whoever that is.
And if this story isn't a testament to that, I don't know what is. Because, I mean, Edgar didn't have a choice. Yeah. There was no consent there.
No, God,
no. All.
No. I wrote this down because I think this was great. My favorite aspect of this story was just the whole, like, Soren's attitude of just being too old for this shit. Was just peppered throughout every part of, from the moment he started to walk in until the end of the story, right? He's just too old for it. He's like, he walks in and there's this like, you know, snot-nosed girl at the door who's like, ID. And Soren wants to be like, don't you know who I am? You absolutely know who I am. You're just being told to give me and probably everybody else a hard time.
Right.
And Olivia put like the disaffected teenager, right, at the door who's like, whatever, can I see your ID?
I don't care that you're clearly 87. I need to check your ID to make sure that I can give you this alcohol.
And I should say, I do know that it's not his ID, it's his invitation, but still, it's the same idea.
The same kind of thing.
Of like, the bouncer at the front being like, look, you're obviously 50-something years old, but like, just give me your ID. And you're like, some people may be flattered by that, but in this particular instance, it's definitely disrespect, right?
Yeah, it just reminds me of when I worked at a grocery store and it was like, okay, I have to card actual everyone, even though there are people who clearly don't need to be carded to buy alcohol. And you even had to do it for like the non-alcoholic beer.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
because it was non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah, I think when I worked as a cashier and I would run the cigarette area, I would have to... I think the policy was like you had to card anybody that looked under 40. And so there were, like I said, there were definitely some people who were like, oh, of course I'll show you my ID. And there were other people who were like, really? Really? And I was like, look, just take the compliment and move on, all right? I gotta do my job. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, like, I don't want to do it either. Trust me. I don't even want to be here. Yeah, I worked at CVS for a while back when they had cigarettes behind the counter.
Sure.
And chewing tobacco and all kinds of other stuff. And people came in for that stuff all the time, and you had to see their ID.
Also, as a brief aside, I was such a nerd. And by that I mean, I don't actually mean that. I have never smoked. I don't ever plan to smoke or chew tobacco or anything like that. But I would work that counter because that was where they needed me. And somebody would be like, can you get me the this? And they'd name it. And I'd be like, I'd turn around and just look at this big wall. Like, I don't... They'd have to like point to be like
they usually
the green one in the middle, and I'd be like, okay.
You know what? Stores like moving things around.
Yeah.
I know this because I used to be a merchandiser who it was my job to move things around, so everyone hated me. But
wow.
The cigarettes and stuff like that, they don't move around. They stay in the same spots that they always were in.
Yep.
Because it makes it easy for somebody to go, it's right over there.
Yeah.
And that makes it so much easier for the 17-year-old who has to look at this wall of cigarettes that they've never seen before and go, oh, yeah, okay, sure, this one.
Yeah. So anyway, Soren's too old for this shit. And so...
we all.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I'll get to that in a second. I will. I'll get to that in a moment. But I also appreciated that he was kind of so frustrated with himself, where he's like, of course this was going to happen at some point. Mm-hmm. Of course it was. Because Olivia was always going to vie for power. She was always, she was the one who, if we recall, at the end of the Eldritch Moon stories, when Soren is stuck in the wall for the first time, or at that moment, Olivia is the first person that shows up.
Yeah.
And she gets in his face and she's like, oh, are you stuck? Yeah. She's like, are you stuck? Oh, I'm so sorry. Do you need help? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you. No, I'm just going to let you sit here and watch your world die. And then she just walks off and he gets to watch Emrakul, like, destroying everything. We all know how that worked out eventually. Yeah, Amy hates Soren, so fair. But
he deserved it.
Right. But what I'm getting at is he had that fair warning.
Yeah.
That spoiler, she has no respect for you.
Right.
if you need to be told that. But in addition, he's like, okay, so Runo Stromkirk is a no. She's not going to pick him. She's not going to pick any of the Falconraths, right? They don't have anybody for her. The Dumnathis are not...
Falconraths are so cool.
The Dumnathis are not interested in her. And she's not going to be able to get him. So the only vampire that is available is Edgar Markov. And
which, he's a grandpa, so how available it really is he?
I mean, sugar daddy status, I guess. You just wait for him to die and then you take over the whole shebang, if you will. Get all that inheritance. And then the line that I wrote down, because it is the most I've ever related to Soren Markov, is when he said, really, some of the guests can't be counted as people. And I've 100% been to those parties where you're just like, really? This is what we're deciding to do? I was very, like, at first I read that and I was like, holy crap, Soren. But then I was like, no, I've been there.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. I don't have a lot of respect for Soren to begin with. And then he makes a statement like that, and it's hard for me to have any respect for him. But I also get it. You know, I can also kind of see it from his point of view. Like, yeah, these people don't give a fuck. They're screwing him over. They're, you know, taking control of the entire plane and killing people willy-nilly for the frickin' fun of it. And it's just detrimental. But at the same time, he's the one who put himself in charge of trying to wrangle them and sort of make the whole idea that Edgar had of creating the vampires in the first place somewhat viable as opposed to just a disaster. So and he really has had, it's been a losing battle from the get-go. And he really just hates, I think he just kind of hates the world because he gave himself that responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Well, because if he didn't take it on, nobody else would, and then the world would just go to hell, is really what his thought, I feel like what his thought process was.
Yeah, but dude, you didn't do it.
Sure.
Like, it's not your fault.
Sure, but it's his responsibility, especially...
It's not.
Especially as an old walker who has the power to do so. Great power, great responsibility and all that.
No, it's Edgar's responsibility. He's the one who fucked up. He's the one who needs to fix it. He should, you know, it shouldn't be up to his grandson to do it because Edgar's immortal. If Edgar was dead because he was old, then maybe it makes sense for his grandson to take over that responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But Edgar's not dead. He's immortal.
Yeah.
So, like, he can clean up his own damn mess.
And then I, like, ending it, or pseudo-ending it, with Soren's family. Like, the other members of Soren's family showing up. Yeah. And Olivia being like, you're not the only one on the groom side. And he has family members, and he even says, he's like, you know, I'm sure, I don't know how, but I'm sure she dug up all the people that hate me, right?
Like
that are like sick of me. Yes,
most.
Exactly, right? and that, like, that's kind of how it ends, and it's really like, holy crap. So what I thought of at the end of this story after reading all of that was, this story was a huge, like, a pile of crap on Soren, right? Mm-hmm. Which it leads me to believe it's those moments where, like, you know, this on top and this on top and this on top and this on top, and now he's got to be at the bottom and kind of explode, throw everything off, and then be able to fight back in some way, whether that's literal or figurative. I'm hoping, I don't know how you feel, but let us know, but I'm hoping that he gets that moment. Right? I know that the Gatewatch is planning on coming in. We know from some of the cards that they likely will, but I'd love to see Soren actually be able to get some comeuppance here. Or no, have Olivia get some comeuppance from Soren, I guess. But have him get some revenge on the fact that, sure, this is a power grab by Olivia, but she's doing it in such a way to just be essentially, like you said, holding up a middle finger to Soren the entire time. Right. Like, she's like, I'm going to gain all this power over here, but also you're right there, right? Okay, here's my finger. Like,
she's Mean Girl in it.
Yeah, basically, right? Where she's like, yeah, like being super catty about it. Right. They even say, like, she's focused on the whole party and everything, but she, like, never takes her eyes off Soren.
Right. even when she's like trying to wake up the groom, she's still
and the rest of the
looking at
family.
Soren.
Yeah.
And of course she is, because she's doing it in front of him. She's doing it to piss him off.
To rub it in his face. Yeah, 100%.
You see what I'm doing? You see what I'm doing?
Yeah.
You see what I'm doing? I know you hate it. You see what I'm doing?
Doesn't this bother you? Yeah. So it's like, you know, I find it interesting that I feel like he should have been able to take on 4 guards, personally. He took on 3, but he lost against the 4th, and then more and more came in. That I get. Once there are like a 5th, a 6th, a 7th, okay. But 4 guards? I don't know. I mean, maybe he's limited now in his abilities following the mending, and so he's not really used to having to use them, but I don't know. I feel like he should have been able to take 4, but we will see how the rest of this story goes it'll be 6 weeks until we see the last, but in the 3 more stories after this one, before we get to the end of the main stories.
Yeah, maybe that's just because he's like a sad sack now. I'm still of the opinion that this is poor characterization. It may be that I don't know enough about the original Innistrad stories. So I know Soren the Ruthless, right? And I don't necessarily know the Soren that had to interact with other vampires and his family, right? So maybe around then, he's a much more submissive person. And I suppose that makes sense, especially in this type of a situation where it's everyone's ganging up on him and they all have the power and he does not.
Well, and the patriarch is out, right? So he's not in charge anymore. Edgar's awake.
Right.
And so that like hierarchy of like, well, my granddad's awake. I can try to tell him something, but if he doesn't listen, he's the boss. Like, what the hell can I do? So, yeah.
But at the same time, he's not the boss.
Yeah.
Clearly, the very manipulative woman is the boss, and the men are just the pawns.
Minus the manipulative part, isn't that kind of always the case? Anyway.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Not always.
No, not always.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard to feel like this is the same Soren. It's hard to feel like they didn't just kind of retcon his character to a point, or I don't know.
Okay.
Again, maybe it's just that I don't know the old Innistrad stories, the original Innistrad stories.
Sure.
Enough. And maybe this is what he was like back then, too. Because he, again, like, if he's around his family, if he's around all these vampires, like, maybe that's just what it is for him, unfortunately. And then when he's around other people who he thinks he's more powerful than, then he is different. But yeah, I mean, I know Soren as being someone who's so ruthless and so like he cares about Innistrad, so it's not like he's just self-centered, but he cares about Innistrad and nothing else.
Yeah, to the detriment of literally anything, any other responsibilities he has.
If the rest of the multiverse imploded, but Innistrad was fine, he wouldn't give a crap. And in my mind, there's nothing worse than that. But so it's hard for me to read these stories and feel like it's even close to the same person.
Okay, fair enough. I'm curious what folks think about that, because we talked about that in the last main story as well. So if people have opinions, again, for or against, definitely let us know. But in terms of the story, I think that's kind of all I had, right?
Yeah, if I'm missing something with that, if there's a piece of characterization that I need to know to kind of fill in the gaps there. I want to know what those pieces are.
100%.
So
Let us know.
please leave it in the comments.
Definitely. If you feel like giving reference of like, oh yeah, in this story, this was the thing.
Right.
Feel free to do so. If you don't know the exact reference, but you feel like you remember, still let us know. You know, whatever it's got to be, we'll see what we can do in figuring it out, and then continuing the conversation. Because looking at past characters and their current versions of themselves, whether we or you feel that they are continuing that trajectory or whether they've moved in an entirely new direction, is still a great way for all of you to join the two of us in showing off our...
#Vorthos Pride.
That's right. Keep it going. Thank you all so much for being here. I did mention it at the beginning, but please don't forget, we have other channels as well, linked down in the description box below.
Yes.
Video Games for All, Gluten Free for All. Definitely check them out. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bells.
Ding.
There and here still. If you liked this, there's a button that can allow you to express that. There's like a thumbs up. And you can share it with other people that you think might like it as well. We would really appreciate that. It helps immensely. And we appreciate any and all support that you are all willing to give. But for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I've been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.